Let's take a trip back in time, almost exactly 100 years, with this amazing little guide from 1923. It's by a master grower named George J. Ball, and he promised to share all the secrets to growing the perfect sweet pea. So, today, we're going to open it up and see what he had to say. Right from the get-go, our guy George J. Ball lays it all out on the table. He has this really strong philosophy that knowledge isn't some secret you should lock away. Nope. He believed it's a gift, something you're supposed to share to make things better for everyone. And that powerful idea? It's really the heart of his entire guide. And for Ball, this wasn't just a nice thought. It was a serious duty. You see, he saw himself as just one link in a long chain of growers, stretching back for generations. He felt his mission was to take all that knowledge he'd inherited, make it even better, and then pass it on. All of it contributing to what he called universal betterment. Okay, so with a philosophy like that, where do you even begin? Well, you start at the very bottom, right? The foundation, the soil itself. But what he has to say about it, it might just surprise you. You see, Ball had been around. He'd seen these incredible crops growing in pretty much every kind of soil you can imagine. Light, sandy stuff in Florida, heavy clay out in Pennsylvania, you name it. And seeing all that led him to this big realization, one that kind of went against everything people thought they knew at the time. And there it is. That's the punchline. It's not about the soil you start with. It's about what you do with it. The soil is just the beginning. The real secret ingredient is the grower's skill, their careful attention, and just knowing what the plant needs. And he doesn't just leave you hanging with vague advice either. He gives us this very specific recipe. You take old sod, mix it with cow manure, throw in a whole 100-pound bag of bone meal, and then, get this, you just let it all sit and break down for an entire year. Yeah. In 1923, patience was definitely part of the recipe. So now, let's see how all this plays out in the really high-stakes world of commercial growing. Ball talks about something called the early crop, which he says was, and I quote, sometimes referred to as a gamble. This is where things get really intense. And this really gives you a sense of just how tough this was. These growers were basically trying to create winter in the middle of summer, trying to convince this cool weather plant to grow during the hottest part of the year, all so they could cash in on a winter harvest. I mean, one bad heat wave in September and your entire crop could be toast. And as if the weather wasn't enough of a headache, these little plants were constantly under attack. You had your aphids, you had mosaic disease, and then you had the dreaded red spider, which Ball so charmingly warns would literally eat them alive. The solution back then? Spraying everything. And spraying it often, with some pretty strong commercial nicotine. So, if a grower was lucky enough to survive that initial gamble, the work was, it was far from over. Because now came the really skillful part, the daily craft of tending to the vines, of coaxing these little seedlings into a huge, thriving crop. Which makes you wonder, right? If they're all using the same kind of compost and fighting off the same bugs, what's the difference? What separates a pretty good grower from a truly great one? What's the secret sauce? Well, the answer is, it's art. It's poetry. Ball quotes another grower here to make this beautiful point, that knowing how to water your plants isn't something you can just learn from a book. It's a feeling, an intuition. It's like you're born with it. And that same kind of artistry applied to how you supported the vines. It wasn't just about tying them up. It was all about the timing. Ball tells the story where they supported half a bed of plants, but got delayed on the other half for a few weeks. The difference was just staggering. The supported vines were a full foot taller, while the others were just a tangled, useless mess. Timing was absolutely everything. So let's say you've done it. You've mastered the soil, you survived the gamble, you've tended your vines like a poet. But all that hard work doesn't mean a thing if you can't actually sell the flowers. And back in the 1920s, that meant getting them ready for a very particular customer. This quote, wow, it really says everything you need to know. In the flower markets of the Jazz Age, presentation was king. You could grow the most perfect flower on the planet, but if you didn't bunch it the right way, it just wasn't going to sell. How it looked was just as important as how well it was grown. And in a place like Chicago, the style was super specific. This wasn't about just grabbing a handful of flowers and tying them together. No, it was a precise method. You had to arrange 25 stems into this perfect flat fan shape. Also, it would be ready to be used in Milady's corsage. Every single detail mattered, right down to using no 40 thread, never twine. And get this was a real skilled job. Here's a little snapshot of the economics. An experienced buncher could earn their pay making about one of these intricate little bouquets every minute, getting paid $1.25 for every 100 they made. It was a serious, specialized skill. But guys like George Ball, they weren't only thinking about the next crop or the next season. They were always looking to the future, always trying to breed an even better sweet pea. And for Ball, this wasn't just gardening. He saw this slow, patient work of breeding new flowers as taking part in something huge, something universal. He was basically engaging directly with what he called the most powerful force in nature, evolution itself. And let me tell you, this was not a job for anyone in a hurry. To take a single new cross-pollination and turn it into a stable new flower that people would actually want to buy, that could take 5, sometimes 10 years. We're talking about a decade of dedicated, patient work. So what were they aiming for? Well, the market in 1923 wanted what they called self-colors. Clear, solid colors, not anything striped or mottled. Rose pink was the big winner, followed by your classic pink and white, lavender, blue, and white. These were the colors that paid the bills. This timeline really puts that decade of work into perspective. So the famous Countess Spencer pea came out in 1901. By the time Ball was writing this book, just over 20 years later, there were dozens of new and improved versions of it. The pace of innovation was just incredible. And his predictions for what would still be popular 5 years later, turns out he was spot on. And that's how it all comes full circle. All that painstaking work of crossing and selecting plants wasn't just about making a new product to sell. It was about paying that debt to the past that Ball talked about right at the beginning. It was about adding to a legacy and making sure the sweet pea of the future was even better than the one before. Which brings us right back to where we started, to Ball's whole philosophy. He shared his entire life's work in this book, not to keep his secrets safe, but to give them away. Because he truly believed that when we share what we know, we make the world a better place for everyone. It's a message that's just as true today, and it leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about.